The alien prison ship's Revenge drifted through the cold vacuum between star systems, its hull from countless battles. Inside its maximum security bay, Commander Jake sat in his cell, blood still fresh on his torn uniform. 3 days had passed since the fleet had captured him during the Battle of Station, and they had not let him rest for a single moment. They were a proud warrior race, standing nearly 8 feet tall with reptilian features and scales that shifted color with their emotions. They had conquered 17 star systems in the past decade, enslaving every species they encountered. Humans were their target, and they had expected an easy victory. They had been wrong. Commander had been the tactical officer aboard the UES Defiance when the Armada had attacked the human colony on station. The aliens had brought 50 warships against what they assumed would be a small, poorly defended outpost. Instead, they found 12 human vessels waiting for them, led by brilliant defensive strategies. The battle had lasted 18 hours, had coordinated the human fleet's movements with surgical precision, turning the numerical advantage against them. He used the asteroid field surrounding station as both shield and weapon, luring enemy ships into carefully planned ambushes. By the time the smoke cleared, 37 vessels had been destroyed or disabled. But victory had come at a price. The Defiance had taken critical damage in the final assault and had stayed behind to ensure the evacuation pods launched safely. They had found him unconscious in the ship's command center, surrounded by the bodies of his crew who had died defending their post. Now he sat in their prison, a trophy for their failed invasion. The cell was barely large enough for his 6-foot frame, with walls that hummed with energy barriers. Every few hours, guards would arrive to interrogate him, demanding tactical information about human defenses. Each time would meet their questions with silence or carefully chosen words that revealed nothing. High Commander himself had visited twice, his crimson scales darkening with rage each time refused to break. The leader was ancient by his species standards, having conquered more worlds than any other commander in their history. He had never encountered a prisoner who could withstand their interrogation methods for more than a day. "You fascinate me, human," had said during his last visit, his voice like grinding stone. "Your species appears weak, yet you destroyed more of my fleet than any enemy in a generation. How do you explain this contradiction?" Had looked up at the towering alien with steady blue eyes. "We're full of surprises." The answer had earned him another beating, but his expression never changed. The guards had used neural disruptors that sent waves of agony through his nervous system, but had endured it all without crying out. His SEAL training had taught him to compartmentalize pain, to find the quiet place in his mind where suffering could not reach. Between interrogation sessions, studied his captors. They were efficient predators, but they relied heavily on intimidation and brute force. Their technology was advanced, but they used it like a hammer rather than a scalpel. They had grown accustomed to easy victories against species that surrendered quickly when faced with overwhelming power. The prison ship held approximately 200 crew members, with security teams rotating in shifts of 8 hours. The guards carried plasma rifles and wore armor that could deflect most energy weapons, but noticed they moved with the arrogance of soldiers who had never faced a real challenge. They talked freely in front of him, assuming he could not understand their language. They were wrong about that too. Had studied linguistics during his years at the Naval Intelligence Academy. The knowledge had seemed academic at the time, but now it gave him a crucial advantage. He listened to their conversations, learning about ship operations, crew schedules, and the location of critical systems. They were taking him to their home world of Zephyr Prime, where he would face their High Council. They planned to make an example of him, to show their people how human resistance meant nothing against power. The journey would take 6 more days at their current speed. Knew he had to escape before then. Once they reached Zephyr Prime, his chances of survival would drop to 0. But escape seemed impossible from a cell designed to hold the most dangerous prisoners in the galaxy. The energy barriers could cut through steel, and the ship's security systems monitored every corridor. Still had not survived 15 years as a Navy SEAL by accepting impossible odds. He had been in worse situations before, though admittedly not in deep space aboard an alien warship. The key was patience and observation, waiting for the right moment to act. That moment came sooner than expected. On his 4th day of captivity, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. The lights in his cell flickered red, and he could hear running footsteps in the corridors outside. Something had gone wrong with their journey, and the crew was scrambling to respond. A junior guard named paused outside cell, speaking rapidly into his communicator. Understood every word. A massive ion storm had appeared directly in their path, forcing them to drop out of hyperspace for emergency repairs. The ship's navigation systems had been damaged, and they were stranded in an uncharted system. Looked nervous, his scales shifting from green to pale yellow. He was young for probably serving his first tour on a warship. When another alarm sounded, he hurried away without performing his usual security check. Smiled for the first time since his capture. They had made their first mistake, and he intended to make sure it was their last. He had already identified weaknesses in the cell's energy field, tiny fluctuations that occurred when the ship's power grid was stressed. The ion storm was causing exactly that kind of stress. He moved to the back corner of his cell and began working on the access panel he had noticed on his first day. They had searched him thoroughly, but had not found the small metal fragment he had concealed in his boot. It was a piece of debris from the Defiance, bent and sharpened during his capture. Now it would serve as both tool and weapon. The access panel opened after several minutes of careful manipulation. Inside, found the control circuits that regulated his cell's environmental systems. A few precise adjustments would create a feedback loop in the energy field, causing it to overload and shut down for exactly 12 seconds before backup systems engaged. 12 seconds would be enough. Had once escaped from a terrorist compound in Syria with only 8 seconds to spare. This was practically a vacation by comparison. He settled back against the wall and waited for the right moment. The ship continued to shudder as it fought against the ion storm's electromagnetic interference. Emergency teams rushed through the corridors, their attention focused on critical repairs. No one was watching the maximum security bay. Closed his eyes and began the breathing exercises that had sustained him through the darkest moments of his military career. His instructors at SEAL training had taught him that mental preparation was more important than physical strength. A warrior's mind was his most powerful weapon, especially when all other weapons had been taken away. The ship lurched suddenly, and all the lights went out for 3 seconds before emergency power kicked in. Knew this was his chance. He triggered the feedback loop and rolled away from the wall just as the energy field collapsed. For 12 precious seconds, Jake was free in the depths of an alien warship, surrounded by enemies who thought he was safely contained. They were about to learn why humanity had earned a reputation as the galaxy's most dangerous species. Moved through the darkened corridors of the ship like a ghost from human nightmares. The emergency lighting cast long shadows that he used to his advantage, decades of special operations training guiding every step. The aliens had made the mistake of underestimating what a determined human could accomplish when pushed to his limits. The ship's layout followed standard military design, something had studied extensively during his intelligence briefings. The maximum security bay was located in the ship's center, surrounded by layers of defensive systems. Most prisoners would need to fight through dozens of guards and multiple security checkpoints to reach the outer hull. Was not most prisoners. He had memorized the ventilation schematics during his first day of captivity, noting that the air recycling system connected every section of the ship. The ducts were too small for bodies, but perfectly sized for a human who knew how to move silently through confined spaces. Had spent countless hours crawling through similar passages during urban warfare training. The entrance to the nearest air duct was 12 feet above the corridor floor, accessible only through a maintenance hatch. Found a damaged service panel and used his makeshift tool to remove the housing, revealing the climbing holds he needed. Within minutes, he was inside the ship's circulatory system, breathing recycled air that tasted of metal and alien chemicals. The ventilation network carried sound throughout the ship, allowing to track the crew's movements. They were struggling with multiple system failures caused by the ion storm. Engineering teams worked frantically in the lower decks, while security forces maintained their patrols on reduced schedules. The chaos provided perfect cover for his infiltration. His first objective was the armory. Without weapons, he was just a man hiding in the walls of an enemy warship. They had confiscated his sidearm and tactical gear, but their own weapons would serve his purposes. He knew their plasma rifles used a simple trigger mechanism that could be operated by human hands. The armory was located 3 decks above his current position, requiring a careful route through service tunnels and maintenance shafts. Moved with the patience of a professional hunter, pausing at each intersection to listen for approaching footsteps. The ship's crew remained focused on their emergency repairs, unaware that their prize captive was stalking them through their own vessel. He reached the armory level and found an observation point above the weapons storage chamber. Two guards stood watch over racks of plasma rifles, energy pistols, and explosive devices. They looked bored and distracted, their attention focused on the technical discussions echoing from nearby engineering stations. These were not elite soldiers, but regular crew members assigned to routine security duty. Studied their patrol pattern for 10 minutes before acting. The guards followed a predictable route that left the armory unobserved for exactly 40 seconds every few minutes. During one of these gaps, he dropped silently through a ceiling panel and landed behind the weapons racks. The equipment was heavier than human military gear but functionally similar. Selected a compact energy pistol and a bandolier of power cells, testing the weapon's weight and balance. The grip was designed for larger hands, but he adapted quickly to the alien ergonomics. Within moments, he was armed and dangerous again. His next target was the ship's communication center. If he could access their systems, he might be able to contact the human fleet and coordinate a rescue operation. They would not expect such boldness from an escaped prisoner, giving him a crucial element of surprise. The communication center was heavily guarded, but had advantages his captors could not anticipate. His understanding of their language allowed him to monitor security transmissions, tracking guard movements in real time. The ion storm continued to interfere with their sensors, creating blind spots throughout the ship's monitoring system. Made his way through the service corridors until he reached a position directly above the communications array. Through a maintenance grating, he could see 6 technicians working to restore the ship's long-range transmitters. The equipment looked damaged but repairable, with several control stations still functional. He waited until most of the technicians left for an emergency briefing, leaving only 2 specialists to monitor the repair work. These aliens were focused entirely on their technical duties, their backs turned to the service entrance had identified. When they both moved to the far side of the chamber to examine a damaged console, he struck. Dropped through the ceiling and landed silently behind the nearest workstation. The first technician never saw him coming. A precise blow to the neck rendered the alien unconscious without triggering any alarms. The second technician turned just in time to see stolen energy weapon pointed at his chest. "Stay quiet and you live," said Imperfect, his voice carrying the calm authority of a professional soldier. "Move and you die." The alien's scales shifted to bright orange with fear. He had probably never seen a human before the invasion of Station, and the stories of their fighting abilities had clearly not prepared him for this encounter. Gestured toward a storage closet and the trembling technician without resistance. With the communication center secure, accessed the ship's information networks. His fingers flew across alien control interfaces as he downloaded star charts, fleet positions, and tactical data. They had been careless with their operational security, leaving classified information accessible to anyone with basic technical knowledge. What he discovered made his blood run cold. The attack on Station had been only the beginning. 3 massive fleets were converging on Earth itself, planning to assault humanities within the next month. Intelligence reports suggested that human defenses would be overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the invasion force. Uploaded the data to a secure human frequency and began transmitting. The message would take hours to reach the nearest human outpost, but the tactical intelligence could save millions of lives. Earth's defenders needed to know what was coming and how to prepare for it. Alarms suddenly began blaring throughout the ship. Red lights flashed in the communication center as automated systems detected unauthorized access to classified networks. Infiltration had finally been discovered, and the crew was responding with military efficiency. Heavy footsteps echoed through nearby corridors as security teams rushed toward his position. Quickly downloaded the ship's internal schematics and deleted his access logs, buying himself a few precious minutes before the aliens could determine exactly what information had been compromised. He needed a new strategy. The ship was now on full alert, with every corridor being systematically searched. The ventilation system would be monitored, and the service tunnels would be flooded with security teams. Direct confrontation seemed inevitable, but preferred to choose the time and place for that battle. The ship's engine room offered the best tactical position. It was a large space with multiple levels and plenty of cover, perfect for asymmetric warfare. More importantly, they would be reluctant to use heavy weapons in a section containing their primary power systems. One stray plasma bolt could cripple the ship's ability to escape the ion storm. Made his way toward the lower decks, moving quickly but carefully through sections that were not yet under active search. He could hear orders being shouted in as the crew organized their manhunt. They were angry and embarrassed that a single human had penetrated their security so completely. The engine room was exactly as it hoped. Massive fusion reactors hummed behind protective barriers while control systems monitored every aspect of the ship's propulsion. Multiple catwalks and maintenance platforms created a three-dimensional battlefield where superior numbers meant little. Positioned himself behind a power coupling array and waited for his pursuers to arrive. The stolen energy pistol felt comfortable in his hands now, and he had memorized the locations of critical systems throughout the chamber. When they came for him, they would find a very different kind of fight than they expected. The first security team entered cautiously, their plasma rifles sweeping the lower level while their leader barked orders. Counted 8 soldiers, all wearing full combat armor and moving with professional discipline. These were not the casual guards from the armory, but elite warriors trained for exactly this kind of situation. Let them advance deeper into the engine room before revealing his position. When the moment was right, he struck with surgical precision, his first shot disabling the team leader before the others could react. The battle for the ship's heart had begun, and Jake intended to show these aliens exactly why humans had earned their reputation as the galaxy's most dangerous warriors. The engine room erupted into chaos as plasma fire lit up the shadows between massive reactor housings. Moved like liquid mercury through the industrial maze, using every piece of cover to his advantage, while the security team tried to pin him down. Their superior firepower meant nothing in the confined space where precision mattered more than raw strength. The first alien soldier felt his opening shot, his armor sparking as the energy blast found a weak point in the shoulder joint. The remaining 7 spread out across the chamber's lower level, their training evident in their coordinated movements, but had fought in urban environments from Baghdad to Kandahar, and he understood how to turn a defender's advantages against an attacking force. From his elevated position on a maintenance catwalk, picked his shots carefully. Each energy bolt was aimed at critical systems as much as enemy soldiers. When a warrior moved behind a control console, shot would damage both the alien and the equipment he was using for cover. The ship's engines began to stutter as secondary systems failed under the crossfire. "He is destroying our propulsion systems," one of the aliens shouted in their native language. "We must take him alive." The order to capture rather than kill gave another advantage. They had to be careful with their fire, avoiding shots that might cause catastrophic damage to the engine room. Had no such limitations. Every system he damaged would make the ship more vulnerable and increase his chances of survival. A young soldier tried to flank position by climbing a service ladder to the upper catwalks. Waited until the alien was halfway up before shooting out the ladder's mounting bolts. The warrior fell 20 feet to the deck below, his armor clattering against the metal grating as he struggled to regain his footing. The security team's leader was a veteran whose crimson scales marked him as a seasoned warrior. He directed his soldiers with tactical skill, trying to force into a position where numbers would matter. But the human had advantages the alien commander could not understand. Had spent years studying military doctrine during his intelligence training. He knew their standard assault patterns and could predict their next moves. More importantly, he understood that their warrior culture valued direct confrontation over subtle tactics. They would eventually try to rush his position rather than wait for reinforcements. The attack came 15 minutes into the battle. 3 charged catwalk while their companions provided covering fire from below. It was a sound, tactical decision that would have worked against most enemies, was not most enemies. He had prepared for exactly this scenario, loosening the bolts on a section of overhead piping during the early stages of the firefight. When the aliens charged, shot the damaged supports, and sent a cascade of scalding coolant fluid across their path. The lead warrior fell screaming as the superheated liquid found gaps in his armor. The second attacker made it past the fluid trap, but found waiting with a commandeered plasma rifle taken from the first casualty. The alien's weapon was powerful, but slow to cycle between shots. Human reflexes allowed him to fire 3 times in the space between the first and second blasts. Only the third attacker reached position, and the 2 warriors grappled hand-to-hand on the narrow catwalk. The was larger and stronger, but had trained in close-quarters combat against opponents of every size. He used the alien's momentum against him, throwing the warrior over the catwalk's railing to crash into a control panel 30 feet below. The remaining security team regrouped on the engine room's main floor, their confidence shaken by the loss of half their number. Could hear reinforcements approaching through the ship's corridors, but he had accomplished his primary objective. The engine room's control systems were severely damaged, leaving the ship dead in space until repairs could be completed. High Commander's voice echoed through the ship's communication system as he personally took command of the search operation. His words carried the fury of a predator who had discovered that his prey was more dangerous than anticipated. "All sections report to battle stations," commanded. "Seal the engine room and flood it with paralytic gas. I want this human taken alive, but I care nothing for his comfort." Smiled grimly as he heard the plan. They were making another critical error by underestimating human adaptability. His SEAL training had included extensive work with chemical warfare, and he had already identified the engine room's emergency oxygen supplies. A few modifications to the environmental controls would create a safe zone that even paralytic gas could not penetrate. The ship shuddered as its remaining functional engines struggled to maintain power. Through the engine room's viewports, could see the ion storm still raging outside. Lightning arced between cosmic clouds of charged particles, creating a natural barrier that prevented any ship from entering or leaving the system. They were trapped here until their repairs were complete. Intended to make sure those repairs took much longer than planned. He had identified the ship's primary power coupling, a massive assembly that connected the fusion reactors to the main distribution grid. Destroying it would leave the vessel completely powerless, but the explosion would also likely kill everyone in the engine room, including himself. It was a last resort option that hoped to avoid. His mission was not to die heroically, but to survive long enough to warn Earth about the incoming invasion. The tactical data he had transmitted would help, but first-hand intelligence from an escaped prisoner would be far more valuable. Gas began seeping into the engine room through the ventilation system, filling the lower levels with a pale green mist that sparkled in the emergency lighting. The remaining soldiers quickly retreated to sealed positions, leaving apparently trapped in the contaminated chamber. Instead, he activated the emergency oxygen system he had modified earlier. Clean air flowed through a small section of the upper catwalks, creating a bubble of safety in the toxic environment. Had turned their own weapon against them, using the ship's life support systems as both shield and sword. The paralytic gas would dissipate within an hour, but did not intend to wait that long. While his enemies assumed he was helpless in the poisoned atmosphere, he planned his next move. The ship's shuttle bay was located 2 decks above the engine room, accessible through a service corridor that bypassed the main security checkpoints. If he could steal one of their small craft, might be able to escape the ship and hide in the ion storm until human rescue forces arrived. The plan was desperate and dangerous, but it offered better odds than remaining trapped aboard an enemy vessel. Began working his way toward the service access, moving carefully through his oxygen-protected zone. The thought they had won by forcing him into a chemical trap, but they had simply given him time to prepare his next surprise. Outside the ship, the ion storm began to weaken as the stellar phenomenon moved toward a more distant part of the system. Soon they would be able to restore full power and resume their journey to the home world. Knew he had only a limited window of opportunity before his situation became hopeless. But hopeless situations were exactly what SEAL training had prepared him for. Jake had never met a challenge he could not overcome through skill, determination, and the relentless human refusal to accept defeat. They were about to learn why their species' greatest mistake had been underestimating the warriors of Earth. The hunt was far from over. In fact, was just getting started, moved through the service corridors like a predator stalking through familiar territory. They had sealed the main passages leading to the shuttle bay, but they had forgotten about the maintenance tunnels that connected every section of their ship. Their oversight was about to become fatal. The paralytic gas had cleared from the engine room, leaving behind the acrid smell of alien chemicals and the bodies of warriors who had underestimated human ingenuity. Had waited until the last possible moment before leaving his safe zone, timing his escape to coincide with the shift change that would leave critical sections momentarily unguarded. Intelligence reports had described shuttlecraft as fast but lightly armored, designed for rapid transport rather than combat operations. A single pilot could operate the basic flight systems, though mastering alien controls would require adaptability that few species possessed. Had trained on captured enemy equipment throughout his military career, and technology followed predictable engineering principles. The shuttle bay was located on the ship's upper deck, protected by multiple security barriers and automated defense systems. Under normal circumstances, reaching it would require fighting through dozens of guards and surviving concentrated firepower from fixed weapons emplacements. These were not normal circumstances. Systematic sabotage had damaged the ship's power distribution network, forcing the crew to prioritize critical systems over secondary defenses. The shuttle bay's automated systems were operating on backup power, reducing their effectiveness and creating exploitable vulnerabilities. More importantly, most of the ship's security forces were still searching for him in the lower decks. He reached the maintenance access point overlooking the shuttle bay and observed the scene below. 8 craft were secured in launching positions, their sleek hulls gleaming under the hangar's work lights. 6 guards patrolled the area while technical crews performed routine maintenance on 2 of the vessels. The guards were alert but not expecting an attack from above. They focused their attention on the main entrance and the corridor access points, leaving the maintenance areas largely unwatched. Had identified his target, a scout ship positioned near the launching tube that would provide the fastest route to open space. Timing would be critical. The launching sequence required approximately 90 seconds from engine startup to bay door opening, during which the shuttle would be vulnerable to defensive fire. Needed to eliminate or disable the guards before beginning his escape attempt, but doing so quietly enough to avoid triggering ship-wide alarms. He had retrieved additional weapons during his journey through the ship, including stun grenades that could incapacitate multiple targets simultaneously. The aliens used these devices to capture prisoners alive, but intended to turn their non-lethal weapons into tools of liberation. Positioned himself above the center of the shuttle bay and calculated blast patterns that would neutralize all 6 guards without damaging the scout ship's control systems. The stun grenades used sonic pulses that would be absorbed by the shuttle's hull while leaving the interior electronics unaffected, perfect for his needs. He dropped the first grenade into the middle of the guard formation, watching as the warriors turned toward the unexpected sound. The sonic pulse detonated before they could react, sending all 6 aliens crashing to the deck in unconsciousness. The technical crews working on the distant shuttles looked up in confusion, but were too far away to be affected by the blast. Rappelled down a maintenance cable and landed beside his chosen escape craft. The scout ship's access hatch was secured by a simple electronic lock that yielded to the universal unlocking tool he had improvised from components. Within seconds, he was inside the alien vessel and powering up its systems. The control interface was more complex than human designs, but followed logical patterns that could decipher through trial and observation. Flight controls occupied the center console, while weapons and defensive systems were grouped on secondary panels. Most importantly, he located the emergency launch sequence that would override normal bay procedures. Alarms began shrieking throughout the ship as automated sensors detected unauthorized shuttle activation. Worked quickly to complete his pre-flight checklist while security forces rushed toward the shuttle bay. He had perhaps 2 minutes before they arrived in sufficient numbers to prevent his escape. The scout ship's engines came online with a deep thrumming that vibrated through the hull. Strapped himself into the pilot's seat and engaged the launching sequence, watching as the bay doors slowly opened to reveal the swirling chaos of the ion storm outside. The electromagnetic interference would provide perfect cover for his escape, hiding his ship's signature among the cosmic disturbance. Heavy footsteps echoed through the shuttle bay as the first response teams arrived. Saw warriors taking positions behind cover, their weapons trained on his craft. High Commander's voice boomed through the hangar's communication system, his words carrying the rage of a predator whose prey was about to escape. "Human, you have nowhere to run," declared. "Surrender now and I will grant you a quick death. Continue this futile resistance and you will suffer beyond your species' capacity for endurance." Activated the shuttle's communication system and replied in perfect, his voice calm and controlled despite the desperate nature of his situation. "Commander, I have a counter-proposal. Release all human prisoners in your fleet and I might consider letting some of you live." The audacity of the response clearly stunned the alien commander. Kutse's massive form stride into the shuttle bay, his scarlet scales darkened to deep crimson with fury. The leader had personally conquered 17 star systems, and no prisoner had ever escaped his custody before. "You dare threaten me, insignificant creature?" roared. "I have crushed empires that spanned multiple galaxies. Your pathetic species will be nothing more than a footnote in the chronicles of my conquests." Engaged the shuttle's weapon systems and targeted the bay's primary support structure. A focused plasma beam could bring down the overhead crane assembly, creating chaos that would cover his escape. But first, he wanted to deliver a message that would reach every in the fleet. "Commander, you made one critical error," said, his words broadcast through the ship's communication network. "You assumed that capturing one human would give you leverage over our entire species. Instead, you have shown us exactly what we are fighting against. When word of this reaches Earth, every man and woman in our fleet will know that surrender is not an option." The shuttle's engines reached full power as prepared for launch. Through the viewport, he could see the ion storm beginning to dissipate as the stellar phenomenon moved toward the system's outer reaches. Soon they would be able to restore full communications and call for reinforcements, but by then would be long gone. Raised his personal weapon, a massive plasma cannon that could punch through starship armor, but had anticipated this moment, positioning his craft so that any shot at the shuttle would also damage the bay's life support systems. The commander was trapped between his desire for revenge and his responsibility to his crew. "Fire on me and you kill your own people," observed. "Stand down and let me leave peacefully. This is your last chance to choose wisdom over pride." The alien commander's scales flickered between crimson and black as he struggled with the decision. Around the shuttle bay, his warriors waited for orders while technical crews scrambled to clear the blast radius. The tension stretched taut as both sides prepared for violence that could destroy them all. His finger hovered over the launch control, ready to blast his way to freedom regardless of the consequences. He had come too far and sacrificed too much to let pride stop him now. Earth needed the intelligence he carried, and he would deliver it no matter what stood in his HFY commander made his choice with the cold calculation of a predator who had survived countless battles. He lowered his weapon and stepped back, his crimson scales shifting to pale yellow as he accepted the bitter reality of his situation. For the first time in his long military career, a single prisoner had outmaneuvered his entire command. "You may escape today, human," said, his voice carrying the promise of future vengeance. "But this war is far from over. My fleets will find you and reduce it to ash. Your species will learn the price of defying the Empire." Kept his weapons trained on the bay's support structures as he replied. "Commander, you still don't understand what you're fighting. You see us as prey, but we are predators who have learned to work together. Every human in the galaxy will hear what happened here today. They will know that your empire can be beaten." The scout ship's launch sequence reached final countdown as prepared for the most dangerous part of his escape. The bay doors were fully open now, revealing the swirling maelstrom of the ion storm beyond. Electromagnetic discharges danced between clouds of charged particles, creating a cosmic light show that could hide a fleet of ships. Engaged the emergency launch and felt the shuttle's acceleration press him back into the pilot's seat. The craft shot through the bay opening like a bullet from a rifle, its engines screaming as they fought against the storm's gravitational interference. Behind him, the prison ship dwindled to a point of light among the cosmic chaos. Plasma fire erupted from the ship's defensive turrets as the aliens tried to destroy him before he could escape. But had studied their targeting systems during his observation period, and he knew their weapons could not lock onto a target in the electromagnetic interference. Their shots went wide, dissipating harmlessly into the storm's swirling energy. The scout ship bucked and rolled as it fought through the ion storm's outer layers. Warning lights flashed across the control panel as the craft's systems struggled with the electromagnetic pulse that accompanied each lightning discharge. Wrestled with the alien controls, his hands moving across unfamiliar interfaces as he fought to keep the shuttle stable. Through the viewport, he could see the storm's heart approaching, a massive wall of energy that stretched across thousands of kilometers. No ship could survive passage through that cosmic maelstrom, but was not planning to challenge it directly. His goal was the storm's edge, where the interference would mask his escape route while allowing his craft to survive. The shuttle's navigation computer failed as another electromagnetic pulse overloaded its circuits. Switched to manual control, relying on visual reference points and his own spatial awareness to guide the craft through the dangerous passage. His years of flight training had prepared him for exactly this kind of challenge. A massive discharge lit up the space ahead as two energy clouds collided in a display of cosmic violence. The resulting shock wave caught shuttle and sent it tumbling end over end through the void. He fought the controls desperately, using attitude thrusters to stabilize the craft before it could be torn apart by gravitational stress. The shuttle emerged from the storm's influence after 20 minutes of terrifying flight through cosmic chaos. Found himself in clear space beyond the phenomenon's reach, with stars visible through the viewport for the first time since his escape began. The ship was nowhere to be seen, hidden somewhere in the storm's electromagnetic maze. Activated the scout ship's communication array and began transmitting on human military frequencies. The signal would take hours to reach the nearest outpost, but the message would eventually make its way to Earth's defensive command. The tactical intelligence he had gathered would help humanity prepare for the coming invasion. While the transmission uploaded, studied the scout ship's navigation computer to determine his location. The ion storm had carried him deep into uncharted space, far from any known trade routes or military positions. His fuel supplies were limited, barely enough to reach the edge of the nearest star system. But had not come this far to die alone in the cosmic void. The shuttle's sensors detected a small asteroid field approximately 6 hours away, offering potential shelter and raw materials for emergency repairs. More importantly, the asteroids would hide his ship's signature from any search parties. He set course for the asteroid field and engaged the autopilot, allowing himself to rest for the first time since his escape began. The alien pilot's seat was uncomfortable for human physiology, but had endured worse conditions during survival training. Sleep was a luxury he could not afford until he reached safety. The hours passed slowly as the scout ship crossed the empty space between star systems. Used the time to study the technical manuals stored in the shuttle's computer memory. The information would be invaluable for human engineers developing countermeasures against alien technology. The asteroid field appeared gradually as a cluster of dark shapes silhouetted against distant stars. Selected a large asteroid with a suitable landing site and guided the shuttle to its surface. The gravity was negligible, allowing him to set down with minimal thruster use. He secured the craft and began inventory of his supplies. The shuttle carried emergency rations for approximately 10 days, along with basic survival equipment designed for physiology. With careful rationing and some creativity, could survive for perhaps 3 weeks while waiting for rescue. The asteroid's composition included valuable metals and frozen water deposits, providing raw materials for extending his life support systems. Had trained in survival techniques for every environment from Arctic tundra to desert wasteland. A small asteroid presented challenges, but nothing beyond his capabilities. 3 days after his arrival, his patience was rewarded. Long-range sensors detected the electromagnetic signature of human warships approaching the system. The rescue fleet had received his transmission and tracked his escape route through the ion storm. Earth's defenders were coming for their lost warrior. The lead ship identified itself as the UES Retribution, a heavy cruiser commanded by Admiral Sarah. Had served under during the conflict, and he knew she would not leave a fellow warrior behind enemy lines. The Admiral's voice crackled through the communication system as her fleet took position around the asteroid field. "Commander, this is Admiral. Stand by for immediate extraction. We have much to discuss regarding your recent vacation with our friends." Smiled as he powered up the shuttle's engines and prepared for rendezvous. His ordeal was finally over, but his real work was just beginning. The intelligence he had gathered would help Earth's forces prepare for the coming invasion, but more importantly, his escape had demonstrated something crucial to both sides. Humans could not be broken by fear or intimidation. They would fight with every weapon at their disposal, turn their enemies' strengths against them, and never surrender while breath remained in their bodies. They had captured a single seal and thought they held an advantage. Instead, they had awakened the fury of an entire species. As Shuttle docked with the Retribution, he looked back at the iron storm where this adventure had begun. Somewhere in that cosmic maelstrom, High Commander was probably still trying to understand how one human prisoner had outfought his entire crew. The alien commander would have plenty of time to think about it during his long journey home. The war between humans was far from over, but the balance had shifted. Earth's defenders now knew their enemies could be beaten, and more importantly, they knew exactly how to do it. Jake had done more than escape from an alien prison ship. He had proven that the human spirit could never be conquered, no matter what force was brought against it. The galaxy would learn to fear the warriors of Earth, and Jake had shown them why. Some things could never be broken, and the human soul was one of them. They had made the mistake of trying to break an American Navy SEAL, and they would spend the rest of their lives regretting that decision. The revolution that began in a prison cell had become something much larger. It had become humanity's declaration that they would never bow to any empire, no matter how powerful or ancient. The stars themselves would witness the consequences of that choice. The moment of truth had arrived, and Jake was ready to show these aliens that some humans could never be broken, no matter what they endured. The final phase of his escape was about to begin. The real fight was just beginning. The revolution had begun.